Section 142. Vaisampayana continued. On hearing that the heroic sons of Pandu, endued with excess of energy, had become so mighty, King Dhritarashtra became very miserable with anxiety. Then summoning unto his side Kanika, that foremost of minister, well versed in the science of politics, and an expert in counsels, the king said, O best of Brahmanas, the Pandavas are daily overshadowing the earth. I am exceedingly jealous of them. Should I have peace or war with them? O Kanika, advise me truly, for I shall do as thou biddest. Vaisampayana continued, that best of Brahmanas, thus addressed by the king, freely answered him in these pointed words, well agreeing with the import of political science. Listen to me, O sinless king, as I answer thee, and O best of Kuru kings, it behoveth thee not to be angry with me after hearing all I say. Kings should ever be ready with uplifted maces to strike when necessary, and they should ever increase their prowess. Carefully, avoiding all faults themselves, they should ceaselessly watch over the faults of their foes and take advantage of them. If the king is always ready to strike, everybody feareth him. Therefore, the king should ever have recourse to chastisement in all the doth. He should so conduct himself that his foe may not detect any weak side in him, but by means of the weakness he detects in his foe, he should pursue him to destruction. He should always conceal, like the tortoise concealing its body, his means and ends, and he should always keep back his own weakness from the sight of others. And having begun a particular act, he should ever accomplish it thoroughly. Behold, O thorn, if not extracted wholly, produced a festering sore. Aye, the slaughter of a foe who doeth thee evil is always praiseworthy. If the foe be one of the great prowess, one should always watch for the hour of his disaster, and then kill him without any scruples. If he should happen to be great warrior, his hour of disaster also should be watched, and he should then be induced to fly. O sire, an enemy should never be scorned, however contemptible. A spark of fire is capable of consuming an extensive forest, if only it can spread from one object to another in proximity. Kings should sometimes feign blindness and deafness, for if important to chastise, they should pretend not to notice the faults that call for chastisement. On occasions such as this, let them regard their bows as made of straw, but they should be always on the alert, like a herd of deer sleeping in the woods. When thy foe is in thy power, destroy him by every means, open or secret. Do not show him any mercy, although the seeketh thy protection. A foe or one that hath once injured thee should be destroyed by lavishing money, if necessary, for by killing him thou mayest be at your ease. The dead can never inspire fear. Thou must destroy the 3, 5, and 7 resources of thy foes. Thou must destroy thy foes, root and branch. Then shouldst thou destroy their allies and partitions. The allies and partitions can never exist if the principal be destroyed. If the root of the tree is torn up, the branches and twigs can never exist as before. Carefully concealing thy own means and ends, thou shouldst always watch thy foes, always seeking their flaws. Thou shouldst, O king, rule thy kingdom, always anxiously watching thy foes, by maintaining the perpetual fire, by sacrifices, by brown cloths, by matted locks, and by hides of animals for thy bedding. shouldst thou at first gain the confidence of thy foes, and when thou hast gained it, thou shouldst then spring upon them like a wolf. For it hath been said that in the acquisition of wealth, even the garb of holiness might be employed as a hooked staff to bend down a branch, in order to pluck the fruits that are ripe. The method followed in the plucking of fruits should be method in destroying foes. For thou shouldst proceed on the principle of selection. Bear thou foe upon thy shoulders till the time cometh when thou canst throw him down, breaking him into pieces, like an earthen pot thrown down with violence upon a stony surface. The foe must never be let off, even though he address thee most piteously. No pity shouldst thou show him, but slay him at once by the arts of conciliation or the expenditure of money should the foe be slain, by creating disunion amongst his allies, or by the employment of force. Indeed, by very means in thy power shouldst thou destroy thy foe. Dhritarashtra said, Tell me truly, how can a foe be destroyed by the arts of conciliation, or the expenditure of money, or by producing disunion, or by the employment of force? Kanika replied, Listen, O monarch, to the history of a jackal dwelling in days of yore in the forest, and fully acquainted with the science of politics. There was a wise jackal, mindful of his own interests, who lived in the company of 4 friends, viz. A tiger, a mouse, a wolf, and a mongoose. One day they saw in the woods a strong deer, the leader of a herd, whom, however, they could not seize for his fleetness and strength. They thereupon called a council for the consultation. The jackal, opening the proceedings, said, O tiger, thou hast made many an effort to seize this deer, but all in vain, simply because this deer is young, fleet, and very intelligent. Let now the mouse go and eat into its feet when it lieth asleep. And when this is done, let the tiger approach and seize it. Then shall we all with great pleasure feast on it. Hearing these words of the jackal, they all set to work very cautiously as he directed. And the mouse ate into the feet of the deer, and the tiger killed it as anticipated. And beholding the body of the deer lying motionless on the ground, the jackal said unto his companions, Blessed be he, go and perform your ablutions. In the meantime, I will look after the deer. Hearing what the jackal said, they all went into a stream, and the jackal waited there, deeply meditating upon what he should do. The tiger, endued with great strength, returned first of all to the spot, after having performed his ablutions. And he saw the jackal there plunged in meditation. The tiger said, Why art thou so sorrowful, O wise one? Thou art the foremost of all intelligent beings. Let us enjoy ourselves today by feasting on this carcass. The jackal said, Hear, O mighty horned one, what the mouse hath said. He hath even said, O fie on the strength of the king of the beast. This deer hath been slain by me, by might of my arm. He will today gratify his hunger. When he hath boasted in such a language, I for my part do not wish to touch this food. The tiger replied, If indeed the mouth has said so, my sense is now awakened. I shall from this day slay with the might of my own arms creatures ranging the forest and then feast on their flesh. Having said this, the tiger went away, and after the tiger had left the spot, the mouse came. And seeing the mouse come, the jackal addressed him and said, Blessed be thou, O mouse, but listen to what the mongoose hath said. He hath even said, the carcass of this deer is poison. The tiger having touched it with his claws, I will not eat it. On the other hand, if thou, O jackal, permittest it, I will even slay the mouse and feast on him. Hearing this, the mouse became alarmed and quickly entered his hole. And after the mouse had gone, the wolf, O king, came there, having performed his ablutions. And seeing the wolf come, the jackal said unto him, the king of the beasts hath been angry with thee. Evil is certain to overtake thee. He is expected here with his wife. Do as thou pleasest. Thus was the wolf also fond of animal flesh, got rid of by the jackal. And the wolf fled, contracting his body into the smallest dimensions. It was then that the mongoose came. And O king, the jackal, seeing him come, said, by the might of my arm have I defeated the others who have already fled. Fight with me first, and then eat of this flesh as you please. The mongoose replied, when indeed the tiger, the wolf, and the intelligent mouse have all been defeated by thee, heroes as they are, thou seemest to be a greater hero. Still I do not desire to fight with thee. Saying this, the mongoose also went away. Kanika continued, when they all had thus left the place, the jackal, well pleased with the success of his policy, alone ate up that flesh. If kings always act in this way, they can be happy. Thus should be the timid by exciting their fears, the courageous by the arts of conciliation, the covetous by gift of wealth, and equals and inferiors by exhibition of prowess be brought under thy sway. Besides all this, O king, that I have said, listen now to something else what I have said. Kanika continued, if thy son, friend, brother, father, or even the spiritual preceptor, anyone become thy foe, thou shouldst, if desirous of prosperity, slay him without scruples, by curses and incantations, by gift of wealth, by poison, or by deception. The foe should be slain. He should never be neglected from disdain. If both the parties be equal and success uncertain, then he that acteth with diligence groweth in prosperity. If the spiritual preceptor himself be vain, ignorant of what should be done and what left undone, and vicious in his ways, even he should be chastised. If thou art angry, show thyself as if thou art not so, speaking even then with a smile on thy lips. Never reprove any one with indications of anger in thy speech. And O Bharata, speak soft words before thou smite, and even while thou art smiting. After the smithing is over, pity the victim, and grieve for him, and even shed tears, comforting thy foe by conciliation, by gift of wealth, and smooth behavior. Thou must smite him when he walketh not aright. Thou shouldst equal smite the heinous offender who liveth by the practice of virtue. For the garb of virtue simply covereth his offences, like black clouds covering the mountains. Thou shouldst burn the house of that person whom thou punishest with death. And thou shouldst never permit beggars and atheists and thieves to dwell in thy kingdom by a sudden sally or pitched battle, by poison, or by correcting his allies, by gift of wealth, by any means in thy power. Thou shouldst destroy thy foe. Thou mayest act with the greatest cruelty. Thou shouldst make thy teeth sharp to give a fatal bite, and thou should ever smite so effectually that thy foe may not again raise his head. Thou shouldst ever stand in fear of even one from whom there is no fear, not to speak of him from whom there is such. For if the first be ever powerful, he may destroy thee to the root for thy unpreparedness. Thou shouldst never trust the faithless, nor trust too much those that are faithful. For if those in whom thou confident prove thy foes, thou art certain to be annihilated after testing their faithfulness. Thou shouldst employ spies in thy own kingdom and in the kingdoms of others. Thy spies in foreign kingdoms should be apt deceivers and persons in the garb of ascetics. Thy spies should be placed in gardens, places of amusement, temple and other holy places, drinking halls, streets, and with 18 tirthas, viz. The minister, the chief priest, the heir presumptive, the commander-in-chief, the gatekeepers of the court, persons in the inner apartments, the jailer, the chief surveyor, the head of the treasury, the general executant of orders, the chief of the town police, the chief architect, the chief justice, the president of the council, the chief of the punitive department, the commander of the fort, the chief of the arsenal, the chief of the frontier guards, and the keeper of the forests, and in places of sacrifice, near wells on mountains, and in rivers, in forests, and in all places where people congregate. In speech thou shouldst ever be humble, but let thy heart be ever sharp as razor. And when thou art engaged in doing even a very cruel and terrible act, thou shouldst talk with smiles on thy lips, if desirous of prosperity. Thou shouldst adopt all arts, humility, oath, conciliation, worshipping the feet of others, by lowering thy head, inspiring hope, and the like. And person conversant with the rules of policy is like a tree decked with flowers, but bearing no fruit. Or if bearing fruit, these must be at a great height, not easily attainable from the ground. And if any of these fruits seem to be ripe, care must be taken to make it appear raw. Conducting himself in such a way, he shall never fade. Virtue, wealth, and pleasure have both their evil and good effects closely knit together, while extracting the effects that are good. Those that are evil should be avoided. Those that practice virtue incessantly are made unhappy for want of wealth and the neglect of pleasure. Those again in pursuit of wealth are made unhappy for the neglect of the two others. And so those who pursue pleasure suffer for their inattention to virtue and wealth. Therefore, thou shouldst pursue virtue, wealth, and pleasure in such a way that thou mayest not have to suffer therefrom, with humiliation and attention, without jealousy and solicitude of accomplishing purpose. Shouldst thou in all sincerity consult with the Brahmanas. When thou art fallen, thou should rise thyself by any means, gentle or violent, and after thou hast thus raised thyself, thou shouldst practice virtue. He that hath never been afflicted with calamity can ever have prosperity. This may be seen in the life of one who survived his calamities. He that is afflicted with sorrow should be consoled by the recitation of the history of persons of former times, like those of Nala and Rama. He whose heart hath been unstrung by sorrow should be consoled with the hopes of future prosperity. He again who is learned and wise should be consoled by pleasing offices presently rendered unto him. He who, having concluded a treaty with an enemy, reposeth at ease, if he hath nothing more to do so. He is very like a person who awaketh fallen down from the top of a tree, whereon he had slept. A king should ever keep to himself his counsels without fear of calumny, and while beholding everything with the eyes of his spies, he should take care to conceal his own emotions before the spies of his enemies, like a fisherman who becomes prosperous by catching and killing fish. A king can never grow prosperous without tearing the vitals of his enemy and without doing some violent deeds. The might of thy foe, as represented by his armed swords, should ever be completely destroyed by plowing it up like weeds and mowing it down, and otherwise afflicting it by disease, starvation, and want of drink. A person is want never approacheth from love, one in affluence, and when one's purpose hath been accomplished, one hath no need to approach him, whom he had hitherto looked to for its accomplishment. Therefore, when thou dost anything, never do it completely, but ever leave something to be desired for by others, whose services thou mayst need. One who is desirous of prosperity should with diligence seek allies and means, and carefully conduct his wars. His exertions in these respects should always be guided by prudence. A prudent king should ever act in such a way that friends and foes may never know his motive before the commencement of his acts. Let them know all when the act hath been commenced or ended. And as long as danger doth not come, so long only shalt thou act as if thou art afraid. But when it hath overtaken thee, thou must grapple with it courageously. He who trusteth in a foe who hath been brought under subjection by force, summoneth his own death as a crab by her act of conception. Thou shouldst always reckon the future act as already arrived, and concert measures for meeting it, else from want of calmness caused by haste, thou mayest overlook an important point in meeting it when it is before thee. A person desirous of prosperity should always exert with prudence, adopting his measures to time and place. He should also act with an eye to destiny, as capable of being regulated by mantras and sacrificial rites, and to virtue, wealth and pleasure. It is well known that time and place, if taken into consideration, always produce the greatest good. If the foe is insignificant, he should not yet be despised, for he may soon grow like a palmyra tree extending its roots, or like a spark of fire in the deep woods that may soon burst into an extensive conflagration. As a little fire gradually fed with fagots soon becomes capable of consuming even the biggest blocks, so the person who increaseth his power by making alliances and friendships soon becomes capable of subjugation even the most formidable foe. The hope thou givest unto thy foe should be long deferred before it is fulfilled, and when the time cometh for its fulfillment, invent some pretext for deferring it still. Let that pretext be shown as founded upon some reason, and let that reason itself be made to appear as founded on some other reason. Kings should, in the matter of destroying their foes, ever resemble razors in every particular, unpitying, as these are sharp. bidding their intents as these are concealed in their leathern cases, striking when the opportunity cometh as these are used on proper occasions, sweeping off their foes with all their allies and dependents as these shave the head or chin without leaving a single hair. O supporter of the dignity of the Kurus, bearing thyself towards the Pandavas and others, also as policy dictateth, act in such a way that thou mayst not add to grieve in future. Well do I know that thou art endued with every blessing, and possessed of every mark of good fortune. Therefore, O king, protect thyself from the sons of Pandu. O king, the sons of Pandu are stronger than their cousins, thy sons. Therefore, O chastiser of foes, I tell thee plainly what thou shouldst do. Listen to it, O king, with thy children, and having listened to it, exert yourself to do the needful. O king, act in such a way that there may not be any fear for thee from the Pandavas. Indeed, adopt such measures consonant with the signs of policy. Thou mayst not to grieve in the future. Vaisampayana continued. Having delivered himself thus, Kanika returned to his abode, while the Kuru king Dhritarashtra became pensive and melancholy. Thus ends the 142nd section in the Sambhava Parva of the Adi Parva.